Sally B.
Genau, funta, começava a funtar.
Oh yeah.
That looks wonderful, doesn't it? Doing a good job of clearing the standing water on the runway there.
The only airworthy Boeing B-17 flying in Europe, and a Duxford resident for all the time it's been in the UK. Its residency here began in 1975, but while it's been based at Duxford all that time, it has of course always been a privately owned and operated aircraft, operated by B-17 Preservation under the tireless leadership of Ellie Sallingboe, supported by her team of highly dedicated professional volunteers. The aircraft will be positioning in for its first run shortly, and I think this should be a chance to see the B-17's upper surfaces. When you watch this aircraft, it's worth considering that operating any historic aeroplane is an expensive undertaking and a difficult one. The difficulties and the expenses are multiplied when you're talking a 4-engine heavy bomber like Sally B.
Yes, Ben, the expenses run at something like £2,000 an hour just for the fuel, I would imagine, on an aircraft like this.
Throughout its time in the UK, Sally B has been operated as a flying memorial to the around 79,000 Allied airmen killed in the European theatre of operations during the Second World War. Of those, 27,000 alone belonged to the United States 8th Air Force, and in particular, Sally B recalls the 8th Air Force heavy bombers, not just B-17s, but also consolidated B-24 Liberators that flew from East Anglia between 1942 and 45, and around 2,000 of which were lost on those very dangerous operations.
Olha, amor, vem direto a nós. Vem direto a nós. Hã? Pode silencioso, já viste?
Whilst we've been huffing and puffing about the weather here this morning, of course back in the day, the airmen that flew these types of aeroplanes, the weather would be one of the minor things that they would be considering, because very often they would take off at times in fog when you couldn't even see the end of the runway, but they nonetheless continued into some very bloody missions, and we remember them as we watch this wonderful aeroplane today.
Yes, it's that history that Sally B recalls that makes it so vital that this aircraft is preserved over here as a living piece of our national heritage. Those are the words of its operator, Ellie Sallingboe. The aircraft, of course, has been laid low at various times over the 38 years of its residency at Duxford by technical problems and, on occasion, financial difficulties. But every time they've bounced back, this is the result, the fact that we're still able to enjoy Sally B flying not just at Duxford, but events across Europe. Ellie says her team and herself are determined to do everything in their power to keep Sally B flying for as long as possible. This B-17G model was originally delivered to the Army Air Force in June 1945, having been built by the Lockheed Vega plant in Burbank, California. And it's worth reflecting in that Sally B has now been based in Duxford. Indeed, this has been the case for some years, for longer than it served in the US, and then subsequently as a mapping aircraft with the Institut Géographique National in France. Who would have thought at the Duxford 75 show, at which this aircraft made its debut at this venue, that in 2013 we'd still be seeing Sally B flying and paying tribute to the 8th Air Force in particular.